I'm Rachel, 28 years old, and I never thought my birth story would begin with abandonment. 9 months of growing our baby, imagining our perfect family, all shattered in one unbelievable moment. My husband Marcus, who once promised to stand by me through everything, left me alone in a hospital parking lot while I was in active labor. He chose his parents' road trip over the birth of his daughter. The betrayal still stings, but it led me to discover a strength I never knew I had. If you're watching this, let me know where you're tuning in from. Hit that like and subscribe button to follow my journey from heartbreak to healing. Trust me, the ending might surprise you. I graduated from nursing school 4 years ago and landed my dream job at Boston General Hospital. My life was busy but fulfilling, working long shifts in the pediatric ward and spending weekends exploring the city with friends. I wasn't looking for a relationship when I met Marcus at my friend Amber's birthday party. He walked in with his confident smile and charming demeanor, immediately drawing attention from everyone in the room. When he approached me at the bar and asked what I was drinking, I felt an instant connection. There was something about his warm brown eyes and the way he actually listened when I talked about my work that made me feel special. Our first date was at this quaint Italian restaurant in the North End. He remembered everything I had mentioned at the party, my love for gardening, my dream to someday work with Doctors Without Borders, even my embarrassing childhood obsession with boy bands. By the time he walked me to my door, I was already imagining a future with him. We dated for 8 months before he proposed. I know some people thought it was too soon, especially my best friend Stephanie. She pulled me aside after our engagement party with concern in her eyes. "Rachel, are you sure about this? You've only known Marcus for less than a year," she said, squeezing my hand. "When you know," I responded confidently. "He's the one, Steph." Looking back, maybe I should have listened to her concerns more carefully. But when you're in love, you see what you want to see. Marcus had a close relationship with his parents, particularly his mother Diana. At first, I thought it was sweet how often he called her and how they had Sunday dinner together every week. But gradually, I noticed how Diana seemed to have opinions about every aspect of our lives, from where we should live to how we should spend our money. "My mom says we should look at houses in Brookline instead," Marcus would say, even though we had already discussed wanting to stay closer to my workplace. Or, "My mom thinks it's wasteful to spend so much on a honeymoon when we could put that money toward a down payment." Still, our wedding day at Westbrook Vineyard was magical. The autumn leaves created a perfect backdrop of reds and golds. I felt like a princess in my lace gown, and when Marcus teared up as I walked down the aisle, I knew I was making the right choice. There was some tension between my parents and his during the reception. My straightforward dad didn't quite mesh with Diana's controlling nature, but nothing could dampen my happiness that day. After the wedding, we moved into a small but charming apartment in downtown Boston. The first year of marriage was everything I had hoped for. We spent weekends antiquing, took cooking classes together, and talked for hours about our future. Marcus worked at a financial consulting firm and often brought work home, but he always made time for date nights and little surprises to show he cared. "I want us to be that couple who's still madly in love after 50 years, he told me one night as we sat on our tiny balcony watching the city lights. When our second anniversary approached, we started discussing having a baby. I had always wanted to be a young mother, and Marcus seemed excited about starting a family. We agreed to start trying after our anniversary trip to Maine. "I can't wait to see you holding our baby," Marcus said as we walked along the rocky shoreline. "You're going to be an amazing mother." Those words replayed in my mind during the difficult months that followed. 6 months of negative pregnancy tests left me discouraged, but Marcus remained optimistic. He downloaded fertility apps and brought home prenatal vitamins without me asking. "It'll happen when it's meant to happen," he assured me, holding me close on the nights when disappointment felt overwhelming. And then, finally, 2 pink lines appeared on the test. I couldn't wait to tell him, so I ran to his office during my lunch break. The joy on his face when I showed him the test is something I'll never forget. He lifted me off the ground and spun me around, right there in front of his coworkers. "We're going to be parents," he announced proudly, not caring who heard. That moment, that pure, unfiltered happiness, makes what happened later even harder to understand. How could someone change so dramatically? How could the man who once celebrated our pregnancy in front of everyone he worked with eventually abandon me when I needed him most? I've asked myself these questions countless times. But back then, in those early days after we found out I was pregnant, there was no sign of what was to come. We were just two people deeply in love, excitedly planning for the new life we had created together. The first trimester was rough with morning sickness that lasted all day. Marcus was attentive, bringing me crackers and ginger ale in bed before he left for work. He downloaded pregnancy apps on his phone and would read me daily updates about how our baby was developing. At night, he would talk to my still flat stomach, telling our tiny baby about all the adventures they would have together. "Your mom is being so brave," he'd whisper. "She's growing you perfectly." When we went to our first ultrasound appointment at 8 weeks, Marcus held my hand tightly as we saw the tiny flicker of our baby's heartbeat on the screen. We both cried, overwhelmed by the miracle we were witnessing. The technician printed out several copies of the ultrasound, and Marcus immediately sent photos to his parents and mine. "That's our kid," he kept saying, staring at the grainy image. "That's actually our baby." But something shifted around the beginning of my second trimester. The morning sickness had finally subsided, and I was feeling more energetic, ready to enjoy this special time. Marcus, however, seemed to be pulling away. He started working later, missing our prenatal yoga classes, and spending more weekends with his parents. At first, I made excuses for him. His job was demanding, and he'd recently been put in charge of a major client account. Plus, maybe it was normal for fathers-to-be to need some space to process the enormous life change ahead. The first real red flag came when Marcus missed our 16-week appointment, the gender reveal ultrasound. I had been looking forward to this for weeks, counting down the days until we could find out if we were having a boy or a girl. But 20 minutes before we were supposed to leave, Marcus called. "I'm so sorry, Rachel, but I can't make it. This client meeting just got rescheduled, and I can't get out of it." I heard voices in the background that didn't sound like a conference room. "Are you even at work?" I asked, suspicion creeping into my voice. "Of course I am," he said quickly. "Look, just find out without me and surprise me tonight, okay? I'll pick up your favorite takeout to make it up to you." I went alone and learned we were having a little girl. I cried in the ultrasound room, partly from joy, but also from the emptiness of experiencing this milestone without my husband. When I got home, I texted Stephanie instead of Marcus. She arrived at my apartment within 30 minutes, bearing chocolate and a tiny pink onesie. "I can't believe he missed this," she fumed, hugging me tightly. "He's just busy with work," I said weakly, though I didn't entirely believe it myself. When Marcus finally came home that evening, without the promised takeout, I showed him the ultrasound pictures. "A girl," he said, smiling. But the enthusiasm I'd expected wasn't there. "My mom will be thrilled. She's always wanted a granddaughter." That became a pattern. Every conversation about the baby somehow circled back to his mother's expectations or preferences. Diana started calling daily with unsolicited advice and strong opinions about everything from baby names to breastfeeding. "Mom thinks we should name her after Grandma Elise," Marcus would say, despite knowing I had already fallen in love with the name Emma. "Mom says store-bought baby food is full of chemicals. She thinks you should make everything from scratch. Mom thinks you're gaining weight too quickly. Maybe cut back on the carbs." That last comment led to our biggest fight yet. I was 6 months pregnant, exhausted from working full shifts at the hospital, and trying to prepare our home for the baby, mostly by myself, since Marcus was rarely around. "Your mother has no right to comment on my body," I shouted, tears streaming down my face. "And you have no right to relay her criticism instead of defending me." Marcus looked shocked at my outburst. "She's just concerned about the baby's health," he said defensively. "You know how much she loves us." "Does she? Because it feels like she's trying to control every aspect of this pregnancy, and you're letting her." The argument ended with Marcus storming out to get some air. He returned 3 hours later, smelling like his mother's signature perfume. He had gone straight to his parents' house instead of taking time to cool off and come back to resolve our issues. My coworkers threw me a beautiful baby shower at the end of my 7th month. They decorated the hospital break room with pink balloons and streamers, and everyone brought thoughtful gifts for the baby. Marcus promised he'd be there by noon, but he didn't show up until the party was nearly over. When he finally arrived, Diana was with him. "We were just finalizing the nursery furniture," he explained, as if that justified missing most of the celebration. Diana added, "I found the most perfect crib at this boutique in Cambridge. The one you picked out online just wouldn't work, dear." I bit my tongue to avoid making a scene at my own shower. Later that night, I cried while folding tiny clothes and organizing them in the dresser that my father had helped me assemble, another task Marcus had been too busy to handle. As my due date approached, I tried repeatedly to reconnect with my husband. I scheduled date nights, bought his favorite meals, and even planned a weekend getaway to the Berkshires for one last trip before the baby arrived. But Marcus was increasingly distant, physically present but emotionally elsewhere. During our hospital tour at 36 weeks, the nurse explained the labor and delivery process, while Marcus checked his phone continuously. "Is there anything more important than learning about how your child will enter this world?" I whispered harshly. He looked up, startled. "Sorry, my mom is texting about Dad's birthday dinner next week." That night, I sat in our partially finished nursery, rocking in the glider chair my parents had given us, wondering what had happened to the man I married. The man who spun me around his office in delight when he learned I was pregnant had been replaced by someone who couldn't go 30 minutes without checking in with his mother. I rubbed my swollen belly, feeling my daughter kick against my hand. "It's just you and me, little one," I whispered, not knowing how prophetic those words would soon become. At 39 weeks pregnant, I woke up feeling different. There was a heaviness in my lower back and occasional tightening that came and went. As a nurse, I recognized these as early labor signs, though I knew it could still be days before active labor began. I called the hospital to let them know and then dialed Marcus's office number. "Rachel," he answered, sounding distracted. "I'm heading into a meeting." "I think I might be in early labor," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Nothing urgent yet, but I wanted you to know." There was a pause before he responded. "Early labor can last for days with first babies. Let me know if anything changes, okay? I'll try to wrap up early." The dismissive tone stung, but I tried to focus on the practical tasks ahead. I double-checked my hospital bag, made sure the car seat was properly installed, and walked around the apartment, hoping to encourage the labor to progress. By late afternoon, Marcus still wasn't home. I called again and got his voicemail. An hour later, he finally texted, "Stuck in traffic. We'll be home soon." When he eventually walked through the door at 7 o'clock, I was timing mild contractions on my phone app. They were still irregular, coming every 15 to 20 minutes. "Have you eaten?" I asked, setting my phone down. Before he could answer, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Diana and Frank, Marcus's parents, standing there with travel bags. "Surprise!" Diana exclaimed, pulling me into an awkward hug that pressed uncomfortably against my belly. "We're heading to Vermont for a few days at the lake house. Thought we'd stop by and see you before the baby arrives." I forced a smile and stepped aside to let them in, shooting a questioning look at Marcus. He avoided my eyes. As Diana bustled around our kitchen, making herself at home and commenting on the dishes in the sink, Frank pulled Marcus aside for a conversation I couldn't quite hear. Then I saw Marcus nodding enthusiastically. "What's going on?" I asked when I could finally get Marcus alone in our bedroom. He sat on the edge of the bed, looking excited in a way I hadn't seen in months. Dad's friend canceled on their fishing trip, so they invited me to come along for the first day. "Just for tomorrow. I'll be back by dinner time." I stared at him in disbelief. "You're joking, right? I'm having contractions. The baby could come anytime." Marcus shrugged. "Early labor takes forever with first babies. You said so yourself. And you've only had a few contractions. I'll keep my phone on me the whole time." "I can't believe you're even considering this," I said, my voice rising. "What if I go into active labor while you're hours away fishing?" "Then you'll call me, and I'll come back," he said, as if it were the simplest solution in the world. "Come on, Rachel. This trip has been planned for months." Dad was really looking forward to spending time with me before I get caught up in newborn stuff. And what about me? I demanded. What about your child? Shouldn't you be looking forward to spending time with us? The argument escalated quickly. Marcus accused me of being hormonal and controlling. I called him selfish and immature. His parents, pretending they couldn't hear us from the living room, eventually announced they would get a hotel for the night and pick up Marcus in the morning. You're making a big deal out of nothing, Marcus said after they left. It's just one day. I'll be back before anything happens. He slept on the couch that night while I lay awake in our bed, feeling both the physical discomfort of late pregnancy and the emotional pain of realizing just how disconnected my husband had become from me and our coming child. Around midnight, Marcus's phone rang. I could hear him speaking in hushed tones. Yes, Mom, I'll be ready. No, she's fine, just being dramatic. I know, that's what I told her. Don't worry, I'll be there. Yes, 7 a.m. works. I'll figure it out with Rachel, don't worry about it. I pulled the pillow over my head to muffle my tears. How had we gotten here? When had his mother's wishes become more important than the birth of his child? I curled around my belly, whispering promises to my daughter that I would always put her first, even if her father couldn't. The contractions continued sporadically through the night. Nothing regular enough to head to the hospital, but enough to keep me from getting any restful sleep. By 5 a.m., I had given up on sleep entirely and was sitting in the nursery, rocking back and forth in the glider chair, when I heard Marcus moving around in the bedroom. I walked in to find him packing a small duffel bag with fishing gear and casual clothes. You're really going through with this? I asked, leaning against the doorframe, one hand supporting my lower back. Marcus barely looked up. It's just for the day. I told you, I'll keep my phone on me. If anything happens, I'll come right back. And if you're 3 hours away on a boat in the middle of a lake, what then? He zipped up his bag with a finality that matched the closing of my heart. You're being dramatic, Rachel. First babies take forever. The doctor said you probably won't deliver until next week anyway. As if on cue, a contraction stronger than any previous one gripped me. I gasped and grabbed the doorframe for support. And then I felt it, the unmistakable rush of warm fluid down my legs. My water just broke, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I stood frozen in the doorway, amniotic fluid pooling at my feet, watching Marcus's face transform from irritation to panic. Now? Are you sure? He stammered, dropping his duffel bag. Another contraction answered his question, stronger than before. I braced myself against the wall, breathing through the pain. We need to go to the hospital, I managed to say once the contraction passed. Marcus glanced at his watch, then at his phone, which was already buzzing with incoming texts. Let me call my parents, he said, stepping around the puddle on our bedroom floor. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Call the hospital first. Tell them we're coming in. While I changed my clothes and grabbed my pre-packed hospital bag, I could hear Marcus in the living room, his voice low but urgent. I caught fragments of his conversation. Her water broke. I know, terrible timing. Still planning to meet you. Might be able to drop her off first. By the time I emerged from the bathroom, Marcus had brought the car around to the front of our building. He seemed agitated, constantly checking his phone as he helped me down the stairs and into the passenger seat. The hospital is only 10 minutes away, he said, pulling into traffic. And my parents are already on the road. They're expecting me to meet them at the rest stop off Highway 95. I stared at him through another contraction, unable to speak until it passed. Are you seriously still talking about going on this trip? They've been planning it for months, Rachel. My dad's been looking forward to this. I've been growing your child for 9 months. I shouted, then winced as another contraction began. They were coming faster now, maybe 7 minutes apart. Marcus drove with one hand on the wheel, the other constantly checking his phone. It buzzed again, and he glanced down. Mom says they can wait for an hour at the rest stop, but not much longer if they want to get to the lake house before dark. I couldn't formulate a response. The physical pain of contractions combined with the emotional agony of realizing my husband was actively considering abandoning me during childbirth left me speechless. As we approached the hospital, I assumed Marcus would pull up to the emergency entrance. Instead, he turned into the main parking lot. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Just finding a spot," he muttered, driving past rows of filled spaces. "Marcus, take me to the drop-off area. I'm in labor." He parked in a spot far from the entrance and turned to face me. His expression held conflict, but not the kind I expected. It wasn't a battle between staying with his laboring wife or leaving with his parents. The battle had already been decided. He was merely struggling with how to tell me. "Rachel, listen," he began, his voice taking on that placating tone I'd grown to hate during my pregnancy. "The hospital has everything under control. They deliver babies every day. You'll be in good hands with the doctors and nurses." I stared at him in disbelief. "You can't be serious right now. My parents are waiting. This trip means a lot to my dad. It's just for today. I'll be back tonight or tomorrow morning at the latest. I'm your wife. I'm having your baby right now." Marcus had the audacity to check his watch. "First babies take forever, remember? The doctor said it could be 12 to 24 hours from when labor starts. I'll probably be back before anything major happens." The contraction that hit me then was so intense I couldn't respond. I gripped the dashboard, breathing heavily through clenched teeth. When I could speak again, I said, "If you leave me now, don't bother coming back." His face hardened. "Don't be dramatic. You're making this a bigger deal than it needs to be." Then Marcus did something I will never forget as long as I live. He stepped out of the car, walked around to my side, and opened my door. Instead of helping me out, he reached across me to grab my hospital bag from the back seat. He placed it on the ground next to the car and stepped back. "The entrance is right there," he said, pointing to the building about 100 yards away. "You can handle this. Just go to the reception desk and tell them your water broke." He actually smiled, as if trying to lighten the mood. "Think of it as practice for independence. Call me when there's real news, okay?" I sat paralyzed, unable to process what was happening. "You're leaving me in a parking lot while I'm in labor?" "You'll be fine," he said, already backing away. "My mom needs me too. She's been really stressed about this trip." And with that, Marcus got back in the driver's seat, gave me an awkward wave, and drove away, leaving me alone in a hospital parking lot, contractions now coming every 6 minutes. I sat there for several minutes, shocked beyond tears. A contraction gripped me, and I moaned loudly, doubling over in the seat. That's when a security guard on patrol noticed me. "Ma'am? Are you okay?" he asked, approaching cautiously. "I'm in labor," I managed to say. "My husband just left me here." The guard's face registered disbelief, then concern. "Let me get you a wheelchair," he said, already speaking into his radio. His name was Alan, and he stayed with me until a nurse came with a wheelchair. As he helped me into it, I had another powerful contraction. "Where's your partner?" the nurse asked, gathering my bag. "He left," I said, the reality of it finally hitting me. "He left me to go fishing with his parents." The nurse and Alan exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. Shock, pity, anger on my behalf? Probably all three. "Let's get you inside," the nurse said gently. "What's your name, honey?" "Rachel," I replied, tears finally spilling over. "Rachel Adams." As they wheeled me through the emergency entrance, I fumbled for my phone. I needed someone, anyone, who wouldn't abandon me. Stephanie answered on the first ring. "Is it time?" she asked excitedly. "Marcus left me," I sobbed into the phone. "I'm at Boston General. My water broke, and he left me in the parking lot to go on a trip with his parents." "He what?" Stephanie's voice rose in disbelief. "I'm coming right now. Don't worry about anything else. I'll be there in 20 minutes. True to her word, Stephanie arrived as they were settling me into a labor and delivery room. She took one look at my face and climbed right into the bed with me, holding me as I cried between contractions. "I can't believe he did this," I kept saying. "How could he do this?" The nurses were incredible, providing not just medical care but emotional support. One older nurse named Barbara patted my hand and said, "Honey, I've been delivering babies for 30 years, and I've seen it all. But sometimes, labor shows us exactly who people are. And sometimes, that's a gift." I didn't understand what she meant then. How could this abandonment possibly be a gift? Hours passed. The contractions intensified. I progressed from 4 centimeters to 6, then stalled. The pain was overwhelming, but so was the heartbreak. Stephanie never left my side, coaching me through each contraction, wiping my forehead with cold cloths, and keeping my mind focused when it wanted to spiral into despair over Marcus's betrayal. "You're doing this," she kept telling me. "You're so strong, Rachel. You don't need him." My phone buzzed occasionally with texts from Marcus asking for updates, as if he were checking on the status of a package delivery rather than the birth of his child. I couldn't bear to look at them, so Stephanie took my phone and silenced it. After 12 hours of labor, I was finally fully dilated and ready to push. The room filled with medical staff, my doctor, several nurses, a pediatric team standing by. The only person missing was the one who had vowed to stand by me in sickness and in health, for better or worse. As I pushed through the most physically demanding experience of my life, bringing our daughter into the world without her father present, something shifted inside me. With each push, I felt not only the physical pressure of childbirth, but also the weight of my marriage falling away. 3 hours after Emma was born, after I had held her, nursed her, counted her perfect fingers and toes, Marcus finally called in a panic. "Rachel, why haven't you been answering? Are you okay? Is the baby coming?" Stephanie held the phone up so I could see the caller ID, raising her eyebrows in a silent question. I shook my head and turned my attention back to the miraculous little human in my arms. Stephanie declined the call and turned off my phone. "He doesn't deserve to be part of this moment," she said quietly. And as I looked down at my daughter's peaceful face, I knew she was right. Emma Elaine Adams came into the world at 7:23 p.m. after 14 hours of labor, weighing 7 pounds, 4 ounces. She had a full head of dark hair and her father's dimples, though I tried not to dwell on that resemblance as I held her for the first time. "She's perfect," Stephanie whispered, tears in her eyes as she gently touched Emma's tiny hand. The mixture of emotions I experienced in those first hours was overwhelming. Profound joy at meeting my daughter coexisted with crushing disappointment in her father. I felt simultaneously stronger than I'd ever been and more vulnerable. I had just accomplished something miraculous, bringing life into the world, yet I was also facing the reality that my marriage was likely over. The nurses were extraordinarily kind, giving me extra time in the delivery room before moving us to the postpartum unit. They seemed to understand that I needed this sacred space to process not only the birth, but also the abandonment. "You did amazing," my labor and delivery nurse said before her shift ended. "Both as a mother and as a woman standing in her power. Remember that strength." In the quiet of night, as Emma slept in the clear bassinet beside my hospital bed, I finally allowed myself to check my phone. There were 17 missed calls from Marcus, 23 text messages, and 4 voicemails. The text showed his progression from casual to concerned to panicked. 7:30 p.m. How's it going? Any progress? 8:45 p.m. Mom wants to know if the baby is here yet. 9:56 p.m. Rachel, please answer. I'm getting worried. 10:27 p.m. I'm sorry I left. Please just let me know you're okay. 11:38 p.m. The nurse at the front desk won't tell me anything because I'm not there. Please call me back. 12:15 a.m. I'm on my way back to Boston. Please be okay. I listened to the first voicemail. Marcus sounded out of breath, background noise suggesting he was driving. Rachel, I lost track of time. We went on this hike to see the sunset, and there was no cell service, and I'm so sorry. Please call me back. Let me know you and the baby are okay. I'm on my way to the hospital now. I deleted the remaining voicemails without listening to them. Then I turned off my phone again and placed it in the drawer of the bedside table. Stephanie, who had stepped out to call her boyfriend and get some coffee, returned to find me staring at my sleeping daughter. He's been calling, I said quietly. What do you want to do? She asked, sitting at the edge of the bed. Nothing. Not yet. I need time to think. Stephanie nodded. I called your parents. They're driving up from Philadelphia first thing in the morning. Fresh tears filled my eyes at the thought of my parents, who had been married for 35 years and had always shown me what true partnership looked like. How would I explain to them what Marcus had done? Thank you, I whispered. For everything. You never have to thank me, Stephanie said firmly. Just rest now. I'll stay right here. Around 2 in the morning, a different nurse came in to check my vitals and help me to the bathroom. As we slowly made our way back to the bed, she mentioned casually, "Your husband is in the waiting room. Has been for hours. Security won't let him back without your permission." My heart raced. I don't want to see him. The nurse nodded without judgment. That's absolutely your right. Should I tell him anything? I thought about it for a moment. Tell him his daughter was born at 7:23 p.m. Tell him she's healthy. And tell him I'm not ready to see him. The nurse squeezed my hand. You've got it, honey. And for what it's worth, I've been doing this job for 20 years. You're not the first woman whose husband missed the birth for less than emergency reasons. But the strong ones, like you, they always figure out what they deserve. Early the next morning, a hospital social worker came to see me. She introduced herself as Jessica and explained that the labor and delivery team had noted unusual circumstances around my delivery. I understand your husband wasn't present for the birth, she said gently. He chose to go on a trip with his parents instead, I replied, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. He left me in the parking lot. Jessica's professional demeanor cracked for just a second, revealing shock before she composed herself. I see. I'm here to make sure you have adequate support for when you go home. Do you have someone who can stay with you? My parents are on their way from Philadelphia, I told her. And I think I might not be going back to our apartment. Jessica nodded. That's a perfectly valid choice. I can provide you with some resources for temporary housing if needed, as well as information about your legal rights regarding both the baby and your marital property. We discussed practical matters like breastfeeding support groups, postpartum checkups, and newborn care. As she was leaving, Jessica paused at the door. One more thing, we can list specific people as restricted visitors if that would make you more comfortable. I thought about Marcus sitting in the waiting room, probably rehearsing his excuses. Yes, I said firmly. I'd like to restrict Marcus Adams from visiting until further notice. My parents arrived shortly after noon, their faces a mixture of joy at meeting their first grandchild and fury at what Marcus had done. Where is he? My father demanded, after hugging me carefully and admiring Emma. I'd like to have a word with him. Dad, please, I said tiredly. I don't need that right now. I just need help figuring out what's next. My mother, practical as always, took charge. Howard will go to your apartment and pack whatever you and the baby need. You'll come stay in the guest house until you decide what you want to do long term. I nodded, grateful for their unwavering support. Thank you. As my father prepared to leave for my apartment, the nurse came in to tell me Marcus was becoming increasingly insistent about seeing me and the baby. He brought flowers, she said, raising an eyebrow. Flowers, my father repeated incredulously. He abandons his laboring wife in a parking lot, and he thinks flowers will fix it? I almost smiled, despite everything. Tell him I'm not ready, I told the nurse. And tell security he's not authorized to visit. Later that afternoon, I was dozing with Emma on my chest when a commotion in the hallway woke me. I could hear Marcus's voice, loud and insistent. That's my wife and my baby in there. You can't keep me out. Another voice responded, deep and authoritative. I recognized it as belonging to Alan, the security guard who had helped me from the parking lot. Sir, you're on the restricted visitors list. I'm going to have to ask you to leave before we call the police. There was more arguing, then silence. A few minutes later, Alan poked his head into my room. Sorry about the disturbance, Ms. Adams. He's gone now. Thank you, Alan. For everything. He nodded. Just doing my job. Both times. The following day, after the pediatrician checked Emma and declared her perfectly healthy, we prepared for discharge. My mother had brought clothes for me and a going-home outfit for Emma. My father had returned with suitcases of essentials from the apartment. He was there, Dad said grimly. Tried to stop me from taking your things. I reminded him about Massachusetts property law and suggested he might want to consult an attorney. As a nurse wheeled me toward the exit, Emma secure in her car seat on my lap, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Sadness for what should have been a joyous family moment, anger at Marcus's betrayal, fear about the uncertain future, but also a surprising sense of clarity. The hospital doors slid open, and my father pulled up in his car. As we drove away, I looked back at the building where my life had changed forever, not just because I had become a mother, but because I had discovered my own worth. The first week in my parents' guest house passed in a blur of newborn care and sleepless nights. Emma was a good baby, but the physical recovery from birth combined with emotional trauma left me exhausted. My mother was a godsend, bringing meals, holding Emma so I could shower, and never once saying "I told you so" about Marcus, though she certainly had the right. My phone continued to light up with calls and texts from Marcus, which I ignored. I wasn't ready to face him or his excuses. On the third day, a text came through that forced me to confront reality. I need to see my daughter. I have rights. The word rights triggered something in me. What about my right to have a supportive partner during childbirth? What about Emma's right to have a father who prioritized her over a fishing trip? I consulted with a divorce attorney that week, more to understand my options than to take immediate action. The lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Beverly, laid out the realities of my situation. Massachusetts is an equitable distribution state, she explained. Child support will be calculated based on both incomes. As for custody, the courts generally favor arrangements where both parents remain involved, unless there's evidence of abuse or neglect. He abandoned me in labor, I said quietly. Beverly's expression softened slightly. That's morally reprehensible, but not legally abusive in terms of custody determination. However, it does speak to character, which judges consider. I left the meeting with a clear understanding that whatever I decided about my marriage, Marcus would be part of Emma's life in some capacity. I needed to figure out how to manage that reality. On day 8, Marcus showed up at my parents' home unannounced. I was nursing Emma in the living room when I heard his voice at the door. "Please, I just want 5 minutes," he was saying to my father, who stood blocking the entrance like a bouncer at an exclusive club. Against my better judgment, I called out, "It's okay, Dad. Let him in." Marcus looked terrible. Unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, clothes rumpled as if he'd been sleeping in them. But I felt no sympathy. 8 days of taking care of a newborn alone had hardened something in me. He stopped short when he saw Emma nursing, a mixture of awe and shock on his face. "She's so small," he whispered. "She's perfect," I replied coldly. "What do you want, Marcus?" He sat on the edge of the armchair across from me. "I want to explain. I want to apologize. I want to meet my daughter. You had the chance to be there when she entered the world," I said. "You chose a fishing trip instead." "It wasn't like that," he protested. "Mom and Dad had been planning this trip for months. Dad's been having health issues, his blood pressure. And Mom thought this might be his last chance to do something like this. She was counting on me. And I wasn't?" I adjusted Emma to my shoulder to burp her. "I was only in labor with your child." "I know, and I'm sorry. I made a terrible mistake. When I got to the lake and realized there was no cell service, I panicked. I drove an hour just to get signal, and by then you weren't answering. I drove straight back to Boston. After you abandoned me in a parking lot," I reminded him. "After you joked that I could handle labor myself." Marcus hung his head. "I don't know what I was thinking. Mom kept saying first babies take forever, that there would be plenty of time. She made it seem like—" "Stop," I interrupted. "I don't want to hear about what your mother said or did. You're an adult, Marcus. You made your choice." "Can I hold her?" he asked, eyes fixed on Emma. "Please." I hesitated, then carefully transferred our daughter to his arms, showing him how to support her head. Despite everything, watching him meet his daughter for the first time brought fresh tears to my eyes, tears for what should have been, for the family moment we should have shared in the hospital. Marcus's eyes filled with tears as he looked down at Emma. "She has my dimple," he said softly. "And hopefully better judgment," I replied. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the only sound Emma's soft breathing. Finally, Marcus looked up. "What happens now?" he asked. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But I can't go back to how things were. I won't be second place to your mother anymore, and I certainly won't let Emma grow up thinking that's normal. I want to fix this, Rachel. Tell me how to fix this." I stood up and gently took Emma back into my arms. I'm not sure it can be fixed, Marcus. But if you want any chance, you need to start by setting boundaries with your parents. Real ones. He nodded eagerly. I will. I promise. I'll do anything. And I need time. Time to heal, time to think. In the meantime, we need to work out a schedule for you to see Emma. She deserves a relationship with her father, regardless of how I feel about you right now. We established that he could visit every other day for 2 hours. I made it clear these were visits with Emma, not attempts to reconcile with me. Marcus agreed, though I could tell he hoped these sessions would eventually soften my stance. The next day, Diana called. I let it go to voicemail, then listened in disbelief to her message. Rachel, this has gone on long enough. You're overreacting about the whole birth situation. Marcus made a mistake, but you're using it to punish him and keep him from his child. You trapped him with this pregnancy, and now you're making him suffer. That's not what family does. I played the message for Stephanie when she came to visit. Her jaw literally dropped. The audacity of that woman, she sputtered. Please tell me you're saving that for the custody hearing. I don't want it to come to that, I admitted. Despite everything, I want Emma to have a father in her life. A father, yes. His toxic mother? Not necessary. Marcus continued his scheduled visits with Emma, always bringing gifts, clothes, toys, books she was too young for. He was trying, I could see that. He had moved out of our apartment into a small place closer to my parents' home. He mentioned casually that it was far from his parents' house, which I took as a small positive sign. During Emma's first pediatrician appointment, I allowed Marcus to join us. He took notes, asked appropriate questions, and seemed genuinely invested in understanding her development and care. As we walked out of the office, he turned to me. Thank you for letting me be part of this, he said sincerely. She's your daughter too, I replied. That hasn't changed. What had changed was my willingness to accept less than I deserved in a relationship. Each night, after Emma fell asleep, I reflected on the patterns that had led us here. How I had gradually accepted Marcus's mother's intrusion into our marriage. How I had made excuses for his absence during critical moments of my pregnancy. How I had diminished my own needs to keep peace. Never again. 3 weeks after Emma's birth, Marcus came for his visit bearing not just gifts for the baby, but divorce papers. I'm not contesting anything, he said, placing the envelope on the coffee table. Whatever you want is fine. I just want to be in Emma's life. I was surprised by this proactive step. Why no? Marcus looked down at Emma sleeping in his arms. Because I realized I destroyed something that can't be fixed with apologies or promises. Because you deserve better than what I gave you. Because I want to do right by both of you, even if that means accepting that our marriage is over. It was the most mature thing he had said since I told him I was pregnant. Later that week, Diana showed up unannounced at the guest house. My mother intercepted her at the door. Rachel is not available, my mother said firmly. I'm here to see my granddaughter, Diana insisted. That's not your decision to make, my mother replied. When Rachel is ready for you to meet Emma, she'll contact you. Diana's voice rose. This is ridiculous. Marcus made one mistake. He abandoned my daughter in a parking lot while she was in labor, my mother said, her voice dangerously calm. That's not a mistake. That's a character revelation. After Diana left, my mother sat with me on the porch swing, Emma sleeping against my chest. You know, she said, watching a hummingbird at the feeder, when your father and I got married, his mother tried to run our lives too. It took him 6 months to stand up to her. I looked at her in surprise. I'd never heard this story before. The difference is, she continued, he did stand up to her. And he chose me every time. That's what marriage is supposed to be, forming a new family unit that takes priority. I nodded, understanding more clearly why my mother had always seemed reserved around Marcus. She had seen what I couldn't. As the weeks passed, Marcus continued his visits with Emma. He filed the divorce papers with the terms we had negotiated through our lawyers. He even started attending parenting classes on his own initiative. But the most significant change came nearly 6 weeks after Emma's birth. Marcus arrived for his visit looking different somehow, more centered, more serious. I told my parents I won't be attending Sunday dinners anymore, he said as he settled in with Emma. I've also found a therapist to help me work through my issues with boundaries and priorities. I nodded, acknowledging his efforts without offering false hope for reconciliation. I know it's too late for us, he added quietly, but I want to be a good father to Emma. I want her to be proud of me someday, not ashamed of how I treated her mother. For the first time since the day he abandoned me, I felt something other than anger toward Marcus. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of acceptance that people can change, even if some damage can't be undone. 6 months after Emma's birth, I found myself in a place I never expected, content in my new life as a single mother. We had settled into a cozy 2-bedroom apartment not far from the hospital where I had returned to work part-time. My parents had gone back to Philadelphia after helping me establish this new home, though they visited at least once a month, unable to stay away from their granddaughter for long. The divorce was finalized with minimal drama. Marcus agreed to a fair financial settlement and a co-parenting arrangement that put Emma's needs first. We communicated through a parenting app that kept our exchanges focused and documented. To his credit, Marcus never missed a child support payment or a scheduled visit. Emma was thriving, rolling over, babbling, and recently discovering the joy of solid foods. Her face lit up whenever she saw me, and that alone was worth every difficult moment of this journey. Stephanie remained my rock, stopping by with coffee and adult conversation whenever our schedules aligned. She was the one who finally convinced me to go out for a girls' night when Emma was 5 months old. "You need to remember you're not just a mother and a nurse," she insisted. "You're still Rachel, smart, funny, beautiful Rachel who deserves to have fun sometimes." That first night away from Emma was both terrifying and liberating. I checked my phone constantly during dinner, even though I trusted my mother who was babysitting. But by dessert, I had relaxed enough to laugh at Stephanie's workplace stories and even contribute a few of my own. Marcus had made significant changes too. He moved into an apartment 20 minutes from mine, deliberately choosing a location far from his parents' influence. He took his parenting responsibilities seriously, learning how to change diapers, prepare bottles, and soothe Emma when she was fussy. Most surprisingly, he established firm boundaries with Diana. When she showed up unannounced during his time with Emma, he actually turned her away. "We have a schedule," he told her firmly. "You need to respect that." I heard about this incident from Marcus himself, not as a bid for praise, but as a simple update during our custody exchange. I appreciated the change, even if it came too late for our marriage. Diana eventually accepted the new reality, though not without resistance. She made several attempts to insert herself into our co-parenting arrangement before finally understanding that those days were over. Our relationship remained cordial but distant, limited to brief interactions during major holidays and Emma's milestone events. As for my own healing process, it happened in small steps. The night feeds alone with Emma became sacred moments of connection rather than reminders of abandonment. My return to nursing brought back a sense of professional identity and purpose beyond motherhood. Reconnecting with friends and even making new ones at Mommy and Me classes expanded my world beyond the pain of my failed marriage. One evening, as Emma played on her activity mat and I sorted laundry, my phone buzzed with a text from a doctor I worked with at the hospital, asking if I'd be interested in grabbing coffee sometime. I was surprised by my immediate reaction, not panic or guilt, but a small flutter of excitement. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I sat next to Emma on the floor, watching her determined attempts to reach a colorful toy just beyond her grasp. "What do you think, little one?" I asked her. "Is Mom ready to dip her toe back in the dating pool?" Emma responded by successfully grabbing the toy and immediately putting it in her mouth, which made me laugh. "I'll take that as a maybe," I said, snapping a photo of her triumphant face to send to my parents. Later that night, after Emma was asleep, I thought about how far we'd come from that terrible day in the hospital parking lot. The pain hadn't disappeared completely. I doubted it ever would, but it had transformed into something else: wisdom, resilience, self-respect. I realized that Barbara, the labor and delivery nurse, had been right. Sometimes labor shows us exactly who people are, and sometimes that's a gift. If Marcus hadn't revealed his true self in that critical moment, I might have spent years in a marriage where I was never truly valued, where my needs would always come second to his mother's demands. Instead, I had been forced to find my strength, to rebuild my life on my terms, and to model for my daughter what it means to know your worth. The next morning, I accepted the coffee invitation. Not because I was ready for a serious relationship, but because I was no longer afraid to explore what happiness might look like in this new chapter of my life. Co-parenting with Marcus continued to have its challenges, but we found a rhythm that worked for Emma's benefit. He had become, if not the husband I needed, at least the father she deserved. As I watch my daughter grow, I'm amazed by her resilience and joy. She has no memory of that chaotic entry into the world, no awareness of how her very arrival revealed character and changed lives. Someday, when she's old enough, I'll tell her the story, not to turn her against her father, but to teach her about self-worth and the strength that comes from facing adversity. I've learned that sometimes the most painful moments lead to the most important growth. That abandonment can lead to independence. That endings can become beautiful beginnings. If you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted, if you've ever had to find strength when you felt most vulnerable, know that you're not alone. Our worth isn't determined by how others treat us, but by how we choose to rise after we've been knocked down. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal? Share your story in the comments below. If my journey has touched you in any way, please subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and growth. And remember, you're stronger than you know until being strong is the only choice you have. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to write your own next chapter, whatever it may be.